Welcome to Development Hell. For every horror movie to hit VOD, there are countless others that end up DOA. Development Hell is a podcast dedicated to unearthing these cursed horror productions. We're going to find out what went wrong and decide if these titles still stand a shot at the green light. I am your host, Josh Korngut. I'm a filmmaker located in Toronto, Canada. Development Hell is a proud member of the Dread Podcast Network. Today's episode is going to be all about Army of Darkness Part 2. So I'm going to be looking into all of the rumors over the years about there being a continuation to Sam Raimi's Army of Darkness. Our guest today is Jason Jenkins. Jason is a writer for Bloody Disgusting, and he also has a podcast, which is called Scream Addicts. So please enjoy our episode all about Army of Darkness, the Lost Sequel, featuring Jason Jenkins. Hi, Jason. Would you be able to give us like a quick introduction to who you are as a person?
Certainly, yeah. So my name's Jason Jenkins. My nickname is Jinx, likely due to my last name, but I'm also a bit of bad luck from time to time, which is a shame, but it's a handle I've used since I was a teenager. I am a writer for Bloody Disgusting. I have a podcast called Scream Addicts, which has various offshoots. The main sort of Scream Addicts title is kind of simple. I just invite on creatives in horror and ask them to choose a single horror movie that they love, and we talk about it at length. I have an offshoot called Voyeurism, where I don't know what you would call him. He's kind of a B, C, and Z grade film aficionado. Named Scott Foy. He chooses some crazy obscure film that I've never seen, and we discuss that. And then there is Scream Addicts Hammer Pub, which finds myself and co-host Paul Farrell providing a running commentary for a Hammer horror film while having a drink or five. Although I've been I've been teetotaling for the podcast recently, but it's still a pub.
Yeah, I was scrolling through your articles for Phantom Limbs, and yes, I did come across the first one, the Candyman one, which is interesting because I covered a Candyman sequel recently. And I also saw, I think it may have been your most recent column, which was on a possible third House on Haunted Hill. Would it have taken place like literally after canon of Return to House on Haunted Hill?
No. It's well, I think both in a way. Of course, at the end of the previous film, Return, that we actually got, it's said that the evil in the house actually comes from this, strange Baphomet idol. And at the end of the movie, the idol is sort of flushed, from the home into was it like the sewer system? I think something like that. And there's sort of that foreboding final shot of it racing towards a big city in the distance. And so I think the third film was going to pick up with that idea. Presumably, the idol was going to get lodged beneath a hospital. One of the characters in a Halloween 2 sort of way was going to wind up at that hospital to get their wounds tended to. And then the evil Dr. Vaniket and all of his undead, or rather quite dead and very ghostly patients were going to pop up in the hospital, and presumably hijinks would have ensued.
Bring It Back, my favorite franchise. I think a lot of like 2000s kids like can't get enough of the Dark Castle output, and that includes me. So
I
I'd love
can't
to
get
see more
enough of it. I love to revisit it. It's funny. At the time, I remember reading, on horror movie message boards, and certainly in the pages of Fango, you were never wanting for a critic to sling a stone at a Dark Castle film. Everybody seemed to dislike Haunted Hill. Everyone hated 13 Ghosts. All of those movies got savaged. And you know what? I loved every one of them. Maybe not Gothica so much, but I appreciate what they were going for. And, it's been very nice to see the current generation sort of coming around on those movies and sort of, pay homage to them and look back on them lovingly. And it's amazing that Scream Factory is sort of leading the charge on all of these revisits with those amazing collector's edition Blu-rays.
So beautiful.
Oh my
Like, who
God.
knew Ghost Ship was going to get this much respect today? As it
and
deserves.
and it deserves it, absolutely, 100%. I love
Even
all
if
of them.
it's just that scene.
Definitely, that scene is a standout. That scene is arguably the best scene of horror that Dark Castle ever did, period. But, the
Possibly.
rest of the movie I think is, quite a lot of fun too, and I just love the idea, we don't really get movies like that anymore where you get a studio-supported, say, 15-20 million dollar mid-range horror film where you have a an Oscar winner who's brought on in a supporting role. Oh, in 13 Ghosts, it was F. Murray Abraham. I don't know that Gabriel Byrne ever won an Oscar, but damn it, he should have. I by that point, I think they were just kind of going for a recognizable name, and I love that it was kind of the producers behind the Dark Castle line. They had previously come off of HBO's Tales from the Crypt, and it seemed like it was that sort of setup where you could invite on a star to just come in and have fun and chew a little scenery and do up a production in such a way that it felt like prestige horror, but at the same time you could have fun and munch on some popcorn while laughing, cackling, and screaming all at once. And I miss that. I don't feel like we get that
Mhm.
nearly enough these days, if really at all.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. It's sort of like a fun, but also sincere horror, and I don't know if we get both at the same time so often anymore.
Yes, it's just something unapologetic. There's nothing wrong with it. And here's the thing, I absolutely adore, the more A24 style horror films. I do love the deadly serious horror films, obviously. But it seems like, and I do adore the movie, but it seems like post Grindhouse, there was this feeling that somewhere in there you kind of had to apologize to audiences if you were making them laugh or if they were hooting and hollering along with it or just having fun, and I felt like
Totally.
I feel like, that can go ahead. I like that, that's fun, certainly,
Hmm.
but can we put that to bed for a bit now and go back to making earnest but fun movies that are very unapologetic?
Well, speaking of horror comedies, this is where we're going today, which is hilarious. But I don't want to go there just yet because next for you, because you're my development health friend, I was wondering, do you have any favorite like canceled horror projects? Because I ask this to people all the time, and they're always like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Oh, I guess not everyone in the world has favorite canceled horror movies." But because you're always, in that niche, I was wondering, do you have any that you're sitting on?
Ooh, that is a great question. I have a couple of white whales that I'm sort of constantly chasing with phantom limbs, but I
Love
got
it.
to say, out of all of the movies that I wish could have been made, out of all of the movies that I've loved writing about, in fact, because I got to do it last fall, weirdly enough, Halloween 6 was the one that kind of most fascinated me, specifically the one that was tied to Tarantino and Scott Spiegel, just because I'm a Tarantino nerd, mainly
Hmm.
because, that was one of the first sort of unmade movies that I ever heard about. Back in the 90s when I was a Fango kid, old Fango, original Fango.
Hmm.
When I was reading that magazine, one of the first issues that I ever picked up talked about the fact that the Halloween 6 that we got was not the Halloween 6 that was planned. And in fact, there was going to be a Quentin Tarantino produced version. Now, as a guy who was just coming off of like Pulp Fiction and From Dusk Till Dawn, I was a huge fan of those. And I thought, my God, what could he have done with Michael Myers? And there have been all these stories floating around over the years. He hasn't talked about it much. He did this great interview last year with Michael Rothman, and he talked about it a little bit, but there was kind of a gray area as to what exactly was going to happen there. Was he going to write it? Was he going to produce it? Was he going to direct it possibly? What was Scott Spiegel? Was he a co-writer? Was he going to direct? Who knows? But actually, I was fortunate enough last Halloween to be able to speak to Scott Spiegel at length, and he really sort of ironed out the timeline of that film's development. And he really, he was great about providing some insight into what his take was going to be. He in fact was going to write and direct, and Tarantino was going to produce, and perhaps come on and write in some fashion too. But unfortunately, you you had a bit of gold that was fumbled right back into the river with the Weinsteins being
Oh,
ahead of the
right.
project. So it never came to be. And we got what we got. And, I dig both versions of what Halloween 6 wound up being. But that is probably the main one. When I think of unmade movie, I kind of wish that we had gotten. And I'd like to think that there's an alternate version where we do have a Quentin Tarantino presents Halloween 6.
Wow, what a good answer. I could clap. So there's so many incredible, bizarre, unmade Halloween movies, and I'm going to tackle one of them for my next episode.
Oh,
But
nice.
I never actually came across that much information on the Tarantino version. It's always like whispered about, so I'm excited to read your article and include it in our show notes. There is an article, right? This is what you're referring to?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Last October, I did a series of four, well, actually, wound up being a series of five Halloween series related articles to sort of
I fucking love
celebrate
it.
spooky season.
An unending depth to the unmade Halloween sequels, and they have some incredible names, as I'm sure you're aware of. Like
Absolutely.
Halloween 3000, that's my favorite one.
I don't think I've heard of that.
MichaelMyers.com, also good.
Oh my God, Michael Myers. Was that too far astray from what we got with Halloween
No,
Resurrection?
no, in fact, that was what we got was an evolution of MichaelMyers.com. And MichaelMyers.com, a real website, a photographer, check him out.
I
Yeah,
need to
because
look that up.
I always write it out and then it like accidentally hyperlinks, and I'm always on michaelmyers.com. It's very funny.
There is a great book that came out at around the same time last fall. It was it was strange that the book came out right in the middle of my run of Phantom Limbs. You know, there was a bit of crossover there.
Hmm.
Fortunately, I don't think either one of us really wound up repeating that much info. But there is a book called damn it.
Taking shape too.
Thank you. Taking Shape 2 about all the, I mean, it is the size of a phone book and it covers at length all
Oh,
of these
is it?
various.
I don't have it yet, but I cannot wait to buy it. I've like messaged, I don't know his name, the author, a couple of times.
Yes, yeah, yeah. It is definitely worth picking up. There's so much insight into so many movies that, some of them you've heard about, but there's so many that I had no idea existed. There was one in particular, penned by Scott Milan, who was going to do one for Platinum Dunes that
Oh.
is maybe the most fascinating take on what a remake of that story could be. It's from the writer of Mother's Day and a couple of other things. I think he was just hired to do something fairly major recently. But if you get the chance to read that one, and well, actually the entire book, definitely worth it.
Was that Halloween Asylum, or am I just taking
No, no,
guesses
I think
here?
Halloween Asylum was that Stephen Hutchinson? I think the Scott Milan one was. Actually, I don't know that it was called anything other than Halloween, but when you get to it in the book, it is the Platinum Dunes version, and they talk about it's the one with the yacht in it, and that's all I'll say. And you wouldn't imagine
Okay,
that a yacht
I'll remember that. I'll remember that.
wouldn't figure into it. And
Um,
again, I don't know that that would necessarily work in the movie the way it is as a setting, but there is. Let me just, without spoiling it for you, I will
uh-huh.
just say that there is an aspect of Michael Myers in the story that we have never quite seen before, and
Mm,
how he chooses to tease that out is just kind of fascinating.
cool. Well, I'm absolutely addicted to what you're talking about. I cannot wait to find out. I can't wait for Halloween, as always. Are you watching anything spooky lately?
It's funny. Just earlier today, I finally caught up on Creepshow on Shutter, which, I
Oh, cool. Me too.
did you? Okay, wasn't the new episode a lot of fun?
Okay, I might not have seen the brand new one, but I've seen like the first two. Is there more than that?
Yeah, well, I think the third episode came out. Wasn't today. It was a couple of days ago now, but it's the one that opens with. I think the first tale is kind of a sci-fi horror tale directed by Joe Lynch and starring Ryan Quanten, and then the second one was a
Oh, hot.
really,
Okay, cool.
really fun sort of. Oh, I don't want to spoil it. I'll just say it's a high school set, kind of a horror comedy with Molly Ringwald in kind of a supporting role, and
Oh my god, they're having so much fun over there. I'm so jealous of these people living their best lives.
it really is.
God damn.
I gotta say, I don't know about you, but I maybe wasn't the biggest fan of the first season, even if I appreciated what they were going for. But this second season, I think, is all around
It's
just
wild.
much stronger.
Yeah, it is. I agree with you totally. I was having it on in the background because, as you were saying, I wasn't too excited about it, but I'm grateful that it exists. And I had the Ali Larder one segment on in the background.
So much fun. I
And
think that one was directed by Axel Carolyn.
well, I was just listening to it, working, and then I was like, okay, I gotta start watching this. This sounds bonks. And it was. It really was. So I gotta start paying attention to season two because it's clearly it's oh yeah, and there was one, I think it's the same episode where they have like a children's show, like
Yes,
like Evil Dead crossover. And it
absolutely.
was so good.
Yeah, I
So
love that. I almost wish that they hadn't gone the route that they did by, there's almost a meta approach with that installment where, Ted Raimi is playing Ted Raimi, and it's like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
almost wish they hadn't done that and they had just somehow, some way had made it an actual extension to the Evil Dead franchise. It would have been so much fun.
It would have been fun. Clearly, they were allowed. So, like, clearly, they were allowed to do what they were doing. So that would have been really fun. I agree. Yeah, when I saw him there, and I was like, "What's going on?" So yeah, I need to pay a bit better attention to this season. That's a really good answer. My answer, because I'm asking myself too, is I revisited Wishmaster recently. I rewatch Wishmaster once every 2 years or so, and I never regret it. I'll have to be honest with you. It's just one of those movies that I can't get enough of.
It's
So
so much fun. It goes back to what we were talking about with, Dark Castle. There is another movie that had a pretty healthy budget. It had a theatrical release,
totally had a healthy budget.
and
Speaking of
practical
Raimi,
effects. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. 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 And that felt like almost. I've heard over the course of the past. Well, what's it been like a decade since the Inciting movie came out? But when the Expendables came out, I
oh
remember
yeah,
so many movies wanting to do like an Expendables of horror. Why can't we bring together all
uh-huh.
the actors that we know? And it's like they already kind of did that
They
back in
did.
'97.
They did. They truly did. Although Kane Hodder's death needs justice. I like just what was that? Maybe it looked better in 1997. It feels like the CGI from the Langoliers miniseries. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yes.
Which, you know what? Why am I making fun of it? I appreciate everything about it. People love to talk about how gay Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is. Obviously, it's like a cliche at this point. We don't talk about how gay Wishmaster 2 is. And anyone that's out there that hasn't seen it, I urge you to watch it because there's so much gay in it. And it's the same director, Jack Shoulder, as Nightmare on Elm Street 2. What is going on with this guy?
That is true.
Well, I
I
think we
hate
know
to
actually.
I hate to admit it. I have not seen 2, 3, or 4. I picked up that great
How dare.
Vestron series, that franchise box set with all 4 movies. I need to blaze through them. But it's
Oh, I'm so
curious
jealous. I
that,
haven't seen 3 or 4 either.
I've heard that they're maybe not that good.
Oh, of
Whatever.
course they're terrible. How could they be good? We would know by now if they were even watchable. But
Where
that's
is
actually
it
how I
on?
watched number one. Is I was trying to watch 3 and 4, and in Canada there was just like no streaming option, and I
Fair enough.
that's enough for the pleasantries. I think we should jump into it. So before we get like too far ahead of ourselves with Army of Darkness, we got to go back again to the origins of Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead. What is your like what is your origins? What is your like relationship with these movies?
So I kind of watched the franchise backwards. I sort of came to Evil Dead 1 and 2 after Army of Darkness. I adored the second film from the moment I saw it. I still do. It is,
Mhm.
I think it is to this day the only installment of the original trilogy that I've seen theatrically at a midnight screening about 20 years
Oh,
ago at the historic Kentucky Theater in Lexington, and it was a great rowdy crowd. It was a great screening, and I gotta say, the first film took me a while to come around on. I used to sort of only view it as a rough draft of Part Two and Army of Darkness that didn't quite get the humor of those films. And as I got older and revisited it more, I realized that it was never really attempting to be that humorous.
no.
Not a bit. So once I sort of accepted it for what it is, I really appreciated its low budget charms and its genuinely scary moments throughout. I think it's just amazing to watch that first film and see Campbell and Raimi sort of slowly finding their creative voices.
It was my first foray into the genre, and I was like an itty bitty baby, and it scared me for real. But yeah, I think the second one is sort of, I don't know, I can't speak for everyone, but it's like the thesis of this franchise. It like really gets it all wrapped up very tightly, like the tone and the jokes and all of it. It's a perfect film. It is a perfect film. I showed my best friend who's not a horror person, but like is interested in horror to some degree, and she definitely preferred the first to the second.
Wow.
The second is just it can be difficult to get if you're just if you haven't spent a lot of time with horror. I don't know. The tone is crazy. It's hard to grasp.
It is. It is. And I think it's all the more so kind of hard to grasp, especially for people who maybe aren't initiated with horror comedies that much, simply because it does such an amazing job of fusing the two together at once all the way throughout. With most horror comedies, you have the horror, for a moment, and then you have just stretches of comedy. It's kind of compartmentalized. And what I love about Evil Dead 2, even though it's not a movie that I would necessarily call terrifying at lengths, it is a horror movie. It's absolutely a horror movie, and it's absolutely a comedy. And those two things are often happening at once, coinciding at the same time. And that's rare, and it's rare still that somebody can sort of nail it in the way that Raimi and Company does.
Nails it. It's so off-putting. Very, am I gonna use this term right? Uncanny valley, where you're
Yeah,
like, this looks human, but it's not human, and I need to be wary of it. Like the whole experience.
no, I
Like where
agree.
he's watching her dance out of the cabin, and you're like, I should be laughing, but I'm so uncomfortable. Claymation really fucks with me, I have to say. I remember when I was a little kid, me and my dad were watching some kind of like heavy metal music video marathon, and too many of them were claymation, and I was like, no, this is so weird.
I will take a good claymation sequence over CG any day of the week. And I'm not a snob about CG if it's done well, but there is something about, you just register it differently when you're watching it. You can believe that it's happening. I would put um, I would put Ted Raimi in, transforming into the long necked ghoul near the end of Evil Dead 2 against any CG creation, as far as getting the hair on the back of my neck, the race of it. It's just a little. It's and the
That
Linda
poor
dance
guy
sequence.
is just tortured constantly in this series. It's like, no thank you. It's like his life is like a COVID test. It just didn't look comfortable at any moment of filming.
No,
So
poor
bad
Ted
for
Raimi. He suffers for his art. That's a fact. Or his brother's
yeah.
art in this case.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's such we'll get into this later, but there's such Three Stooges energy, like that whole family.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and it didn't really hit it didn't really hit me over the head until this rewatch of Army of Darkness, where literally every scene I was like, this is a reference to the Three Stooges.
The cemetery sequence is just pure Three Stooges. I think I love that so much, and that's
Hmm.
once you get to Army of Darkness, I think that's when it sort of lets go of the horror and lets go of that sort of natural eeriness, that was sort of holding over from part one. It's a really great kind of arc that original trilogy has. From one to two to Army
Hmm.
of Darkness, where you start out with horror, then you go to horror comedy, and then by the time you reach Army of Darkness, we're in a complete farce.
Well, that's really leads me into like our Army of Darkness territory and talking about the genre shakeup. I think I didn't say this yet, but growing up, Army of Darkness was always my least favorite of the three because I was always like, why isn't this horror? Like, this doesn't feel like horror to me in a traditional way. I don't like necessarily, I didn't really get it when I was younger. And then I didn't have that attachment to it in the same way over the years, which made this viewing really interesting because it changed my mind. Like, I was like, oh no, I think this is horror. This is like medieval, like Xena horror, but it's still pretty like it's scary sometimes. The evil Ash is scary to look at, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
creepy, creepy image. Definitely, it goes back to again, kind of that eeriness that you have. Definitely, I don't know that I never found the character completely frightening, and yet there are some close-ups on him where you look at him and you just kind of you feel those wounds a little bit, and you kind of just your
yeah,
skin crawls a little bit at him.
it's bad. It's like, okay, so his face got blasted off, and now he's like he's holding it together with a rope, and it looks a little too real. And then you see Bruce Campbell's eyes behind it, and it's just like, oh, okay, like they're going for it. I like when you were talking about the progression between the films because I was thinking about that a lot watching it this time around, where the scope just gets progressively bigger and bigger to the point where the next film was supposed to be like even more fantastical and more of like of visuals, and I kind of wish that I could have seen them take it up a notch yet again, but you can see them do it sort of step by step with these three movies.
Absolutely, who knows how big the fourth film might have gotten. And I really do wish that we could have seen that at some point.
Me too. Me too. I mean, I'm shocked we even have four films in a TV series. Like that feels lucky to me at this point,
Yeah,
considering what we're dealing with.
I think I remember, when it was announced that Ash versus Evil Dead was finally canceled, after 3 seasons, people were starting to, you could feel the near riot online. I forget how many episodes we got per season, but in any case, yeah, I think it was 10 episodes per season, 3 seasons. So we got like 15 hours of
Yeah.
Evil Dead when previously we had only had like, what, four and a half, five, maybe, something like
Maybe.
that, so.
Yeah. And I was grateful that we had 3 seasons. I remember having a sort of similar reaction when it got canceled. People were really mad, and I was just like, how did that happen? How did we have 3 seasons of this show? Also, if you're that mad, where were you? Why weren't you watching it?
Absolutely. I've talked to people before who are like, "Oh, I can't believe they canceled that. Can you believe? I mean, it's Ash. It's great." And then I start to talk about the ending, which I absolutely adore. And
Me
I'll
too.
hear, "Oh, no, 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 wait, 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 wait! I haven't seen the third season yet." And it's like, you are part of the
How
problem.
dare you? Yeah, Bruce Campbell was like telling us. He was like, "Guys, you gotta watch it because we're in trouble."
I do hate to
And
say it, but I
that's
kind of am okay with, if Bruce Campbell is telling the truth this time, and when has he ever in regards to this franchise? Never. But if he's telling the truth about finally hanging it up as Ash, I do think that the final 10 minutes of the third season of Ash vs. Evil Dead is the perfect note to go on, to go out on with that character. Now that depends on what you find that ending to mean. Now, if people find it to be a cliffhanger, then I can understand why people would be upset and they would want to see more. I personally don't think those final moments are necessarily what they appear to be at first glance, and as a result, I think it gives that character sort of very definitive ending. But you don't hear a
Mhm.
lot of people talking about it simply because nobody's watched the damn season. So,
It's mysterious, but I think it's a happy ending. And
oh, totally.
I sort of see it as like Laurie Strode's finale in H2O. It's like I could have left it there. I like our hero overcoming the great evil at the end, even if there is a bit of a
I guess I should say spoiler warning for anyone out there who hasn't yet seen it. And again, you're part of the problem. But
yeah
but I will
yeah
say I found at the great arc with Ash in that series is that they really, not only did they bring over the character from the films, but they gave him an arc in that series where he was a man who was very, very selfish. Even at the end of the first season, going into the second, this is a man who would sort of throw over humanity for his own happiness and to just not suffer anymore. By the time you get to the end of the final episode with him, he's a man who's finally willing to sacrifice himself to save his friends and to save all of humanity. And it feels like this is what everything has been leading to. It culminates in this big battle with the big bad, as it were. And then at the end of that battle, he is left in a situation that should have been kind of mortal to him. It should have been utterly fatal what happens to him. And then the next thing you see, he wakes up and it's the future. And he has, this really attractive woman on his arm. And he has a new hand. And he has a cool car. And he's going to ride out into the world and he's going to fight evil forever because it's all about the continuing battle for him. And I think that that is Ash Williams's death dream.
Aw,
I think I
how dare you ruin my life.
but that
Oh
but that
my
provides
god.
that provides definitive closure for him because he did what he set out to do. He sacrificed himself, and it died a great person. And then on some level, he is happy. Not only is he happy, he's gleeful. I think that's the perfect note to leave that guy on.
Yeah, I mean, he deserves the best, you
Yeah.
know? He's kind of one of our well, he's her only dude hero, really, in canon, so we have to be precious with him. And, yeah, talking about this whole hero's journey with Ash as, like, an antihero is, present the whole time. He doesn't want to be doing any of this, but he has to do it. You have that in Army of Darkness. You have that with the TV show. And I think when you're getting to the heart of any epic story in fantasy or sci-fi or horror, like it's always coming down to that. It's very Harry Potter. It's very the Bible. It's
Very true. And, it's definitely encapsulated in Army of Darkness, I think. Although he is a hero time and time again, you have the refusal of the call, and then eventually, he'll become the hero that he was always meant to be, certainly. In Ash's case, he refuses many, many times. He continues to refuse. He will, you
He
know,
just falls into the hole. He doesn't have it's like it's not his choice. It's non-consensual.
he is he is he is a long-suffering hero. That's a fact. But I do love that
Yeah.
at the end of every story, he is a guy who kind of digs deep and finds the hero within, and I think that's why we like him because he always starts these stories out as the buffoon that we think ourselves to be. Like we're all Ash. And
Yes,
then
or at
by
least
the
the average horror fan, yeah.
yeah, yeah, totally. And then, by the end, Ash is always showing himself, but also the audiences the heroes that they can be. And he's a blue collar horror hero, and there aren't many of those. And I think that's why we love him so much.
I agree. He is totally a blue-collar horror hero. And he's our only final boy, which I think gives him something to, there's something about that too that makes him so special.
Yeah.
Um, we talked about the Three Stooges. I want to talk a little bit about man versus self, but that's so like university essay that I'm bored with it. Scariest scene. Okay, so scariest scene in Army of Darkness, in my opinion, is when his face gets all stretched out with the claymation. It's too gross, too strange. Do you have a scariest moment in this movie?
You know, I I don't know that I find any of the moments to be like super scary. I mean, there is that great, like wonderfully gothic sort of moment where Ash buries Bad Ash and then he is resurrected, right? And the goofy sort of piecemeal way that he leaps from the grave in various pieces and then heals himself is a little silly, but everything leading up until that point and then after the big reveal, I think is really kind of wonderful and a little, maybe a little creepy. Honestly, as funny as it is, I do love the sequence where he fights all of his tiny little selves, which is funny. You mentioned man versus self a moment ago.
Yep.
I do think, the more we get to know Ash throughout the franchise, and I think this especially included the television series, but I think we realize that Ash is his own worst enemy. Forget the book, forget the
Always.
deadites. Like, it's Ash versus Ash. And I love that in Army of Darkness, we
Always.
finally see that play out physically
Yep.
on screen in such a
Like
literal
very
way.
literally.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, because yeah, we have Ash versus his hand, and then we Ash versus the tiny ashes, and then finally he splits into two, and it's Ash versus Ash. So, yeah, I don't know what there's a few I don't. I'm a dummy, so I don't know what I'm talking about right now. But there's like a few of those man versus archetypes in literature. So like man versus the wild, man versus self, and then a third one. And I feel like Raimi was very sort of cognizant of these tropes going into these movies.
Oh yeah, and constantly throwing his long-suffering hero headfirst into them. It's perfect.
Yeah. You know that he's got some persistent back pain, poor guy. And so I'm grateful that we have Ash.
Well, it's funny. We were
Personally.
talking about the progression. You were talking about the movies getting bigger and bigger. I think Campbell himself got bigger and bigger too. In the first
Yeah.
film, he looks kind of like just a normal. He's a handsome dude, but he looks like
Yeah.
just a normal
He's
college
skinny.
kid. You get to him in the second one, he looks a little more like mid '80s action hero. He's a little more cut. He's a little more muscly.
Uh-huh.
You get to him in the third film, like he's a
Yep.
bare-chested, swashbuckling
Oh yeah. Yep.
ready for sword and sandals.
Oh, absolutely. He's He-Man Master of the Universe. The poster is not animated. It's just a photo of him. So no, absolutely. Yeah, you were talking about how you're maybe okay with Ash, retiring. I think I agree with that because we've had such a good run with him, and he's never been stale, which is like almost shocking that we haven't
Yeah.
that he hasn't overstayed his whatever yet. And I think that this is good timing. Also, I love seeing new protagonists in this franchise. The remake, I don't know how you feel about it, but I love it, and I love Mia in it, and I think this franchise is just ripe for more female leads, and I think we're going to be getting one soon.
I agree. I absolutely adore the remake. It's funny. I honestly think it's one of the best made, like genuinely frightening, genuinely terrifying films of this century so far. It's crazy to me how good that film is, and it doesn't get nearly the sort of appreciation that it should. I don't think, especially
Oh, it's so scary.
given that it's apparently viewed as being in canon with the previous franchise too. What with the bandied about crossover that they talked about for a while, I'm not sure it's so much a remake anymore as a spin-off, but let's call it a remake for the purposes of saying it's one of the best damn horror remakes ever.
Oh, completely agree with you. They do their own original thing. They're not slaves to the humor or the camp of it, and yet it it's so effective and it's so scary and it's so disgusting. I saw it on my birthday one year, and my best friend Jules is still traumatized. Sorry, Jules.
I'm
I
still
think
traumatized.
she says she still thinks about that shower scene like once a week.
Oh god. Oh yeah. You know what got me? I used to take bi-weekly. No, they were. I'm sorry, not bi-weekly. They were twice a week. Allergy shots when I was a kid. So anything with a needle, like we're talking the needle pit in Saw 2, like I nearly collapsed in the
Ugh,
theater. But that moment,
sorry.
the stabbing of the hand in the Evil Dead remake. Forget cutting one's tongue into like lengthwise. Forget the shower. Forget the red rain at the end and the chainsaw damage. Forget all of that. That tiny damn needle punching into the hand over and over again. Ooh.
Yeah, that was for you. That was a little gift for you. I'm glad that you liked it. Yeah, that movie had a little something for all of us, and I'm so grateful that they did. And I kind of like how they played with an updated. Never mind the cameo at the end, but like they kind of played with a bit of an updated Ash with the brother character. How he like kind of had a similar features, similar outfit, but he didn't. He wasn't front and center, and I thought that was kind of like a fun take on Ash.
Absolutely.
Almost ready to start talking Army of Darkness 2. But before we do, like, do you have any, like, I don't know, any final thoughts on your experience, your relationship with the original film? Yeah.
I guess just my first experience. It was kind of funny. I had seen ads for Army of Darkness when it was hitting theaters on the backs of it seemed every comic book that I read in the early '90s. And while I loved Darkman, now I had zero interest in checking out this movie. I had no clue who Bruce Campbell was. I had no clue about it being the third film in a franchise. I couldn't have cared less.
Mm.
Cut 2 years later, I'm in high school. I wake up early one Saturday morning. I get pumped with cappuccino and donuts, and I go get my brain fried taking the ACT. And I come back home. My mind is just mush, and I slump down on the
I'm sorry,
toilet.
what is ACT?
Oh, it's kind of like a qualifying exam to get into colleges and whatnot.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm Canadian.
No,
So
you're good. You're good. It's they're
okay,
awful.
okay, okay.
They're so awful.
Okay, I'm
Um,
with you though. I have like the image in my head. This is like mid '90s.
Yeah,
Is this
this
when it
would
came
have
out?
been yeah, well, it had come out in the early '90s. I
Hmm.
never watched it, never had any interest. But after this horrible test sort of had its way with me, I came home, I slumped down, I turned the television on to the Sci-Fi Channel, and I'm watching this guy fight tiny versions of himself in this dark cabin, and I just start cackling wildly at it all. I watched it to the end, not realizing what it was until the credits rolled, and I immediately ran to my local mom and pop to rent the movie and watch it again, and I just adored it. Even though I had to learn the hard way about the various cuts of the film by watching the VHS, which was missing some of the crazier stuff I saw on the weirdly enough edited for television sci-fi version. But
Oh
being
no.
yeah, like they were missing some of the tiny Ash sequence, not all of it, but some of the more Three Stooges stuff, like him slipping in the gruel and flipping and doing the handstand and then coming back down, stuff like that. They had trimmed, and I
How
was
dare
like,
they?
wait, where was that? Come on. Um, but
Mhm.
sort of being a burgeoning horror fan, surfing about, on late '90s message boards, I eventually learned that Army of Darkness was the third film in the franchise. So I sought out the previous films to check out, and I will say, Evil Dead 2 was not hard to find. Evil Dead was insanely hard to find. Like, no rental store
Really?
had it, no shop sold it. It could not be ordered. You couldn't just watch a movie online back then.
What
And
year was this?
this would have been around, I want to say like '96, '97. It was just before Elite and Anchor Bay started pumping out all these great horror
Yeah.
titles in
Uh-huh.
plastic clamshell VHS cases and eventually DVDs. So
Uh-huh.
I was able to finally see that first film that way, and that was That first VHS, that was probably the first of roughly 70 times I've purchased that film on home video. There have been so many versions of all the Evil Dead movies, and I buy them all because I'm a
Yeah.
sucker, but I can't help it.
I love that. Yeah, there are so many versions of this film, and even though, like, the longest one out there is, like, what, 90 minutes? There's still, like, 30 different versions out there, and I cannot promise you that I have seen every moment of it, although I have tried. I know for a fact, and we'll get into it soon, that I have seen the alternate ending, which I'm a little bit obsessed with. So I would say, like, it was about the mid to late 90s when I really started to discover horror, and by then it was pretty accessible. As you were saying, all of these VHSs, like, every gas station had VHSs of horror. It was all accessible to me by then. But that's funny that you had to go searching for the Evil Dead. I kind of like that. It kind of feels appropriate.
Being a movie
Very
fan,
Necronomicon.
oh, totally, totally. Being a movie fan, and especially being a horror fan back in the 90s growing up, you really, like, if you wanted to get into the more obscure stuff, and even by obscure, I'm talking about stuff that wouldn't even be considered obscure these days, like Dario Argento and Lucio Fulci and Italian Jolly, and like all those movies, like those were very, very hard to come by the time. I couldn't find, if you can believe this, I had trouble finding a VHS copy of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the first one, back in the day. Like, I had to go to my local mom and pop and have them order it through their distribution because my local Camelot Music was not able to order it, and I couldn't find it at any of the neighboring video stores. You would find a Texas Chainsaw 2 here and a Leatherface there, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, you had to put in work as a movie fan back in the 90s. Now everything's, and I'm sounding very old man, get off my lawn, but these days kids, they
Mhm,
have everything at their
mhm.
fingertips, but back
Yeah,
in
it's
the
on
day,
YouTube.
yeah, exactly. But back
I
in the day, you had
know.
to work for
Oh, yeah, and if you wanted special features, like if you wanted a trailer, God help you. It's not gonna happen.
it.
But it
Living
made
here
it
for
so
the
much more special.
It did. I remember
And
learning
then
how to.
DVDs came out and we all died. I remember the first time I saw the Alien, like, DVD menu, and I was like, "Oh my god," it, like, really blew my mind. So, yeah.
That
So,
first quadrilogy
we
set.
didn't have it all, but I still like the journey that we had. It was more special.
I agree.
But now you can literally rent anything on YouTube, and I do. In fact, I rented this on YouTube because it's not streaming anywhere in Canada, and I didn't want to take out my box of DVDs.
I don't blame you.
um, okay, so we're gonna start to dig into the lore surrounding Army of Darkness 2. Spoiler alert, there's not that much of it, although there's some. And so that's why we had to really pad this episode with the origins. And I think it was fun, and I think everyone really appreciated it. And so now they're gonna just be grateful for this Army of Darkness 2 report card that we're about to hand out. So I'm assuming, based on everything that you said, that you are obviously was always aware that there was rumors of a continuation to Army of Darkness.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As a fan again who constantly haunted message boards and horror film news websites back in the day, you couldn't go very long without Bruce Campbell giving an interview and saying that we'd be seeing Evil Dead 4 at some point, or we would never see it. We'd maybe see it. It'll definitely happen. It's never happening, but you never know. Keep your fingers crossed. But
What a
also, I'm
dick.
going to dash your hopes. It was always, there is
They're still
no
doing that.
better, no more marvelous troll of his own fans than Bruce Campbell.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely agree. Which is why when they started talking about Evil Dead Now or Evil Dead Rise, I was like, okay, sweetie, we'll see, we'll see. But I am starting to believe that it's a thing. So I want you to know that I've definitely seen the international ending. So just I guarantee you on that. But for our more casual horror fare out there, like my mom, can you explain to us what the original Army of Darkness ending looked like? Because then we're going to talk about how that kind of would have maybe stemmed into a sequel.
Okay, so if you watch the theatrical version of Army of Darkness, Ash is obviously in medieval times. He is given a special potion by the wizard. He is meant to take just so many drops, one for, I believe, every century. He heads into a cave. He blasts it to wall himself in. He hops into the car. He takes the drops. And he wakes up in the present day, and you have this wonderfully fun sequence in S-Mart once he's returned and, taken to telling Ted Raimi all about his time as a king.
A very cute looking Ted Raimi, by the way, but let's continue.
Yeah, they're all so young in that movie. It's crazy. They're babies.
They're
But
so young.
in
Yeah.
the original director's cut, there is this great moment with Ash in the cave. He takes, was it like 6 drops, something like that? He's
Yeah, maybe one or two too many.
Yeah, he's counting the drops, and then something catches his attention. He thinks that something might be in the cave with him. He gets distracted, and then he turns back and he counts the last drop again, continues, finishes. Then you see this wonderful sort of like time dissolve. You can tell that centuries are passing. He's remaining the same age, even though he's growing this marvelously ripped Van Winkle beard and long hair.
Yeah.
And he eventually wakes up. He breaks out of the cave. He walks out, and there's this look of horror that only Bruce Campbell can do. And then there's this great reverse shot over his shoulder where you see this horribly dystopian world sat before him, where he has obviously slept too long. In fact, he cries that out, "Oh God, I've slept too
Yeah.
long." And you realize that he is now a man out of time again, only this time in the future.
It's so on brand for Ash. Like, this is exactly what should and would have happened to this poor dude. It's just like a constant carousel of errors for this poor guy. Which I do love the studio inflicted version because it's a fun ending and it gives us one of the most iconic last finale lines of all time. But this feels a little bit more appropriate to me because I don't think this guy deserves not deserves. I don't think this guy realistically would ever get this clean cut happy ending. Because it's just not in the cards for him.
No, he's meant to be a long-suffering hero. It's like the original ending of Dumb and Dumber. You hear that those guys were meant to get on the bus with all of the beautiful women and ride off into the sunset. And I think was it Jim Carrey who said there is no way that those guys would get on that bus. And I feel the same way about Bruce Campbell as
Absolutely.
Ash. Like Ash, I love that he gets a happy ending at the end of Army of Darkness, but that's also not that guy.
No, which is why your theory makes more and more sense because the only way he would get that happy ending is if he's dead.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I forget. I'm Jewish, so I should remember this properly. But we have the I'm not gonna say this right. The Schlemazel or the Schlemiels, and this is what Ash is. Just like the guy that's like constantly dropping his ice cream, kind of. And it's sad, but it's just kind of like, and then we all know them too. So poor Ash. So that was going to lead. This is like the most well-known iteration of what Army of Darkness 2 or Evil Dead 4 could have been, was this dystopic, futuristic sequel where Ash could have potentially been taking on hordes of deadites in the future. Like he was going to be fighting machines, sort of like a Sarah Connor type character. That could have been really, really fun. It's been suggested, as you sort of touched base on, that there was an Army of Darkness 2 potentially going to happen, a sequel to the remake, and then a possibly stitched together like crossover moment where Ash and Mia team up. I don't know in what world that ever could have happened if we would have had like a Marvel extended universe of the Evil Dead.
We should though. Like we need
We
the
should. We deserve it.
we need the AODCU. I
Yes.
just think that would have been fantastic. I think seeing a much more grounded character like Mia, who's dealt with tragedy and
Hmm.
horror in a much more visceral way, playing against Ash's more super heroic buffoonery, I think it would have made, for a tonal challenge, but if they could have nailed it, I think the result would have been magic.
Yeah, and Ash is such a dad too, and we've played with that successfully in the franchise. Where not only did his daughter successfully sort of come up in the third season of Ash versus the Evil Dead, I think it was season 3, but he's like sort of been the dad archetype to a number of like women characters. So I kind of think it would have worked. I think it could have been like a really cute Buffy Giles dynamic.
Oh, totally. Although it's strange because Mia out of the two would have been the more mature one. Uh,
Exactly. No, totally. And that's like that would have been a source of conflict for them, maybe. But
I would love
um
that.
So the director of the Evil Dead remake, I don't know, do you know how to pronounce his name? Because if you do,
Was it
please do it.
Fede Alvarez?
That's him. Also killed it. Good job. He is just nailing it in the world too. His films are great. Someone tweeted at him a million years ago, around October 2013, saying, "Will you be directing an Army of Darkness 2?" And he didn't say no, but then he just responded with Sam Raimi will. So clearly there are like, these parties where these dudes are just getting together and like talking about potential sequels that could happen. Who's directing Evil Dead Rise?
Oh gosh,
Here, I'll
I
look it up.
do not know. It is a
Hole
director.
in the ground.
Oh, he directed a
He directed The
small
Hole in the Ground. Okay, Lee Cronin.
Lee Cronin.
Yeah. I feel like the Ghost House guys are really good at finding young talent that other people kind of like don't, I don't know, haven't noticed. Cuz I feel like this movie The Hole in the Ground, which is a horror film from 2019, was kind of overlooked but was excellent. Tonally very spooky, very like outside of the box. And they sort of cherry picked him to create the new Evil Dead movie. So I think they have like a really good sense of how to get young talent involved with like fresh takes on the series.
I agree. They're great at, I mean, Fede Alvarez, he's gone on to have a great career, and he started his career with Evil Dead based upon one short film that he had made. They were able to look at that
I
short and
know.
say, this is our guy. I remember watching, it was available online. I'm not sure if it still is, but you can watch that short. It's a great short, but there is nothing about that that would tell me anyway that this is the guy to do Evil Dead. And yet, my God, they saw it because he knocked it out of the park.
Yes, yes, I saw it too, and I agree. Like these are not movies that I would have been like, this is the guy for the job. But I think they have a really good eye for it. Like these are very seasoned Mr. Hollywood types. So I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with it. I feel like it's going to be low budge because I hear rumblings that it's sort of set in one location.
Hmm.
And I think that would be really cool.
It's kind
The
of
rumor is that,
exciting.
yeah. Are you aware of the rumor of how it's where it's going to take place?
It's a high-rise building in an apartment, right?
Yeah. Which is cool. And they're filming either now or very soon in Auckland, New Zealand, which is where I believe the show was shot, and the remake was definitely shot there as well. And I'm pretty sure it's like the only safe place in the world to be shooting right now. So
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
we're pretty
Uh,
lucky.
New Zealand had competent leadership, so people can actually shoot now.
Yes, the best. I know,
They
and
believe
that's
in
they're
science.
filming Drag Race
It's
now
crazy.
there too. I know. Too bad it's literally 7 years away on a plane.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I wouldn't do it. I just don't think I would. If someone was like, "Do you want to go to New Zealand for free?" I'd be like, "No, it's too far. I don't want to." Well, yeah. If you were like, how do you feel about like a 24-hour plane ride? Can you do it?
Me, if I had to, and I definitely want to see more of the world than I have up until this point, but I will say
Yeah, fair.
I'm in Florida now. I did kind of a long distance relationship for a while. I was flying up to Ohio. It was a 90-minute plane flight, and I just gotten used to, I got rid of my butterflies. I was okay with boarding a plane and flying. Everything was great. And the last trip that I took up there, um, turbulence. So it
Oh,
was,
oh, really?
it was like a paper plane in a windstorm. That's what it felt like.
Stop it right now.
So
I've never been through that.
I'm good. I would love to travel to New Zealand by ship. Um, so no, maybe carrier pigeon. I don't know. I trust them more than the metal contraptions that we get into to fly from place to place more, I think.
They're
But
not good. I had the world's worst phobia of flying for so long. I hadn't been on a plane in like 10 years. And then I made a film and it went well. And then all of a sudden we had to travel for it. And I was so scared. And then we like traveled to like 5, 6 places. And now I'm not scared at all. And then the world ended. So I like got over my phobia. It was very hero's journey. And then literally like 75% through our tour, we had to stop, and it was ironic.
no, I
But
hear you. It's tough to get over. I had just gotten to the point where I told myself, you know what? This is no different than traveling on a road. Sometimes you get like new paved highway and it's smooth as can be, and sometimes you're traveling on a gravelly back road, and sometimes there are potholes. Just look at it that way, potholes in the
Hmm.
sky, right? And that's all well and good until you start seeing like the wings leaping up
Hmm.
and down, and it feels like you're dropping 10 feet at once and then raising
Yeah.
back up in the air. Then you can't really talk yourself out of your nerves at that point.
There's a gremlin on the wing. There's an old Victorian lady on the other wing. It's not
There's
good.
something on the wing. Some thing.
Exactly. I have never been through severe turbulence, so I kind of feel like that would literally restart my whole journey. So I hope that doesn't happen for me anytime soon.
Well, it ended mine. So,
I bet it did. Is that relationship still active and successful?
no, it's not. I'd like to
Oh,
think
I'm
that
so
that
sorry.
last plane flight was the harbinger of doom. So,
Oh
and
no. Well,
and
oh,
all
not
things
good.
considered, I will say thank you, plane flight.
Well, you know what? It's about the journey. It's not about anything else. I don't know. Breakups suck. I'm sorry.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm
That's good.
better if that makes sense.
I mean, listen, there's nothing worse. Like, it's being single is so much better than being in a relationship that's not working.
Agreed.
That's my wholesome advice. So you were saying you're a fan of the series. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely.
I need to watch it again. I've seen it once all the way through. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting from an Evil Dead TV series, but now that I'm sort of more familiar with Army of Darkness, I'm like, yeah, it does make us. It's very progressive of Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, and then the show. It's like these are three different entities, but they do make sense one to the next.
Oh, absolutely. And I do love that the series went, obviously because of the rights issues with Universal, they couldn't directly reference Army of Darkness, but obviously this is
Hmm.
still the
Did that
same
change
guy.
by the end of the series?
I don't know.
I thought it
Possibly.
did, but I didn't get any info on it.
I do love, though, that it goes out of its way to marry the continuities of the first two movies. So it acknowledges,
Yes,
obviously, the sisters from the first, it acknowledges the events from the second, in a wonderful way. And it kind of puts to bed that argument as to whether or not Evil Dead 2 is a sequel or a remake.
I agree. And ultimately, it doesn't matter because we have it and I'm grateful. So on the commentary track for the first season of Ash versus the Evil Dead, have you listened? Are you this much of a nerd?
I have not listened to any of the commentaries, to my shame.
Listen, it's not 2005. We're not listening to DVD commentaries anymore, so that's
We're
okay.
not, but we should.
We should be. I agree. I mean, listen, as a concept, it's genius. Like, I want to hear a director talk about his movie from beginning to end all the time. We should normalize this again. I think it's Sam Raimi did share a few of his discarded ideas for future Army of Darkness films on the commentary. So I'm just going to read us through it. Here's a quote. So, for one of these Army of Darkness sequels, or potentially Evil Dead 4, it's kind of hard to differentiate between the two, unquote. So the idea was Bruce is a documentary filmmaker, and I remember one of the ideas was him capturing his own journey through life. I remember we started to write one version of Evil Dead 4, and then someone else chimes in by saying Bruce travels across the country to sell his documentary through in his car to sort of explain the importance of the story he told. It's like, okay, it kind of sounds interesting. Like, My Name is Bruce. Have you ever seen
I
that?
was going to say, is when they say Bruce, are they meaning Ash or do they mean Bruce Campbell
I
Bruce?
think they mean Ash. But you know how like they were gonna call it Bruce Campbell versus the Evil Dead, where it's sort of like hard to differentiate between the two
Yeah, yeah.
entities? But it's hard to know. I think they were talking about Ash. So it's sort of like a road trip
So
movie, which
he
makes sense
became a
for sure.
filmmaker?
I think like he made a documentary on his life. I don't know. This out of all of the ideas that they talk about is the one I understand the least. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna jump us to the next one, which simply Ash fighting a Terminator style army of machines. Yes, please. I'm assuming that's like the continuation of the alternative ending Army of Darkness is just my assumption.
Yeah, that would have to be the case. But would they have any sort of relationship to the Deadites or the Necronomicon? That would be strange
I
if it went just
Yes.
hard
How could they
sci-fi.
not? I think it's like then I'm assuming and hoping and just making this up, where it'd be like Deadites of the future, where it's like Deadites, but like make it. make it Terminator, you know?
Cyborg deadites? I would be down for that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just yeah, it's just like a zombie head, like, on a big machine robot thing. Why not?
I love it.
Okay, and the last one, which is I think my favorite idea, was, they were playing with the idea of, incorporating both of the Evil Dead endings. And there's the US version, which sees Ash return to Michigan, and then the foreign version, which you see Ash go to the post apocalyptic future. And Raimi wrote, we wrote Evil Dead 4 that followed both realities. We were going to be following both Bruces, one in the future and simultaneously cross cutting to the Bruce here in the present. But then they realized that didn't make any sense and they stopped writing it. But it's just so Evil Dead territory, in my opinion. It's
They
just so
should
wacky.
have made could you imagine sliding doors via Army of Darkness?
Sliding
Like,
doors, yeah,
come
yeah,
on,
yes.
why not do that
That's
movie?
what that is. And also, like, you have to be in on the joke to such a huge degree to get what's going on there, right? Like, I didn't know about the 2 versions of the ending for, like, a lot like, there's just so many people that would not have understood it, and I think that may have been the problem, um, with the marketing behind Army of Darkness, where, like, they're assuming more people know what's going on with these movies than they really do, and so they're not spelling it all out in a way that they kind of need to for the average Joe. And so it's just like like filmmaker fantasy filmmaking, where like you're doing whatever you want to do, and it doesn't really matter about the marketing angle. But I do love this concept. It's so strange.
Yeah, I do too. That is the one they should have gone with. I still want to see that movie.
I want to see that movie too. And at the end, very end of this, which we're getting to, I promise, you and I, because we're the professionals, we're going to decide definitively if we're going to get an Army of Darkness follow up. But we're almost there. We're almost there. Okay, to wrap up Army of Darkness 2 territory, do you know or have you read the comic books?
Yes. Yeah, so I'm kind of it depends. I really dig the Dynamite comics that I've read. The earlier ones, the ones that started around, I want to say like 2003, the earlier ones weren't necessarily that great about capturing the voice of Ash or even the films, really. But some of the later arcs are pretty fantastic. There is a run by Steve Niles, the guy who did 30 Days of Night, that's fantastic. There is a crossover with Darkman that is so good it makes me sad that it's not a film. Uh,
Cool.
there's this Mad Max esque Old Man Ash sort of tale called Furious Road that's worth checking out.
I've seen some art from that. Yeah.
There is even a crossover with the Marvel Zombies, which means that Ash is a part of the Marvel multiverse, which I adore.
Wow, 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 wow. Finally.
There, of course, there are the two series of Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, which started off as an adaptation of the unproduced sequel to Freddy versus Jason.
Yes.
Weird note. Apparently, there is some sort of dodgy rights issues with Army of Darkness and Universal in regards to those comic books, and somehow, some way, the original team of Raimi and Tappert and Campbell, they were kind of cut out of that deal, and so they don't really see anything from any of those comics. I was at a convention once, again, I think in Lexington, Kentucky, maybe it was Louisville, and it was announced. This was around the time that those comics had come out, maybe 2, 3 years in. It was announced to this massive line that Bruce Campbell would sign anything you wanted him to sign except for the Dynamite comic books. He refused to put pen to
Mm.
comic book in that case, which I thought was kind of fascinating.
That is fascinating because I don't see him as a petty guy, but I do see him. I don't know. I see him as a very like he takes this stuff seriously. So I bet it's a good reason.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just my instinct of the good guys.
Well, I could just see him being
Um,
like, Ash is me, and Ash is Raimi and Tappert. Ash is all of us, and this is
yeah,
not.
don't fuck us over.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with us. Therefore, it's not Ash. Therefore, you really don't need my signature on it because it has nothing to do with me. I kind of get that. There is now. I don't know if this would have to be licensed through Raimi and Tappert and Campbell, I would think, because there's also a line of Evil Dead 2 comic books that start at the end of the movie, and it kind of zigs where you expect it to zag, and so it splits in a very. I tell you what, if you're going to read the comics, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there's a very, very smart way that Evil Dead 2 in the comic books diverges from Army of Darkness. So it kind of does the sliding doors thing we talk about. Of course, it doesn't acknowledge anything in Army of Darkness is happening, but it continues on with the adventures of Ash beyond Evil Dead 2, and it's not Army of Darkness, and it does make sense. And they're a lot of fun, and they're well worth checking out if you can track them down.
Okay, well, I'm obsessed with that. I also think that's such a beautiful way to wrap up our Army of Darkness 2 segment. So thank you. And I think we're going to head to conclusions. Do we believe that we're ever going to see a continuation of Army of Darkness specifically? Now be careful, because your final answer is the final answer, and we're going to lock it in, and that's just going to be canon.
We will we'll sort of have to send out a memo to Mr. Raimi and Campbell and Tapper.
Oh, no, they're here, actually. They're
Guys!
freaking out. Yeah, they're really nervous. So, but we trust us. We have to make this decision. So, obviously, we're going to get new Evil Dead. So that's not the question. But Army of Darkness specifically, are we going to get Army of Darkness 2? Are we going to get that follow-up to this movie?
Okay, so is this what I want or what I think will happen?
No, what you think will happen.
Okay. So, will we ever see a continuation to Army of Darkness? Honestly, no, I don't think so. I don't think we'll see Ash again. I think, as you noted, I think the Evil Dead franchise will continue on with these sort of unconnected one-offs, even though they may, cross over with one another. Who knows? But I doubt we'll see more Army of Darkness, even though we could, looking at the comic books and the zaniness of the films, I think that Universal could sequelize that film by simply doing kind of a multiversal tale and acknowledging that in the comic books, there are multiple realities. It's very into the Ashverse, if that makes sense. I think if Universal were smart enough and they found a creative team smart enough to acknowledge that the Ash that we would have to have in an Army of Darkness sequel is not necessarily the only Ash, and certainly isn't Bruce Campbell. I think that's the only way to do it. I think you can't simply recast Bruce Campbell. You'd piss off the entirety of the fan base you would need to be courting. But if you dealt with it honestly on kind of a story level, and maybe even invited on Raimi and Tappert and Campbell to produce so as not to insult the creators, then maybe we'd have something. I don't know. But honestly, my feeling is at this point, Army of Darkness was not a massive hit for Universal back in the day. And maybe they want to work with Raimi down the road. He's obviously off doing his own thing with the franchise and the character. So I honestly don't see much in the way of a benefit for Universal to continue the franchise. And as a result, I don't think we'll ever see more Army of Darkness.
Well, Bruce literally just walked out. He's upset. But that, I'm going to have to talk to him later. I think it's going to be okay. But I agree. I don't think we're going to get it in the same way that it's been talked about over the years, or in any similar to what we've seen thus far. Although I think there's a chance we could see like Mia in the medieval times, or get a different character thrown into medieval times, maybe, but it doesn't seem likely.
Could you imagine kind of a riff on Army of Darkness with Mia, but it's as deadly serious as her Evil Dead?
See, I would love to see that. I would absolutely love it. Yeah, definitely. Or even just a female character with a guy name, send her into the past, similar thing. I'm into that.
Yeah, Max. I mean, the character could be called Ash again,
Yeah, it could be. I like that. Well, you never know, even though we do know because we've made the decision and it's definitive.
I'm sorry, guys.
I thank you for your bravery. I know we're not here to make friends. This isn't RuPaul's Best Friend race. But I think that we made the right choice. And I think it was a responsible, outcome.
I think so.
I think so. Yeah. Jason, I want to thank you so much for coming on my podcast. This was so much fun to talk about.
Yeah,
literally the most fun topic of all time, probably.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was an absolute blast, and I will never miss an opportunity to talk about really anything. But it was definitely a blast chatting with you, and certainly about horror that never was. It's obviously a passion for us both, and it was definitely great chatting with you about it. Thank you so much for having me on.
You can also follow us online on basically any social media platform, and you should like and comment and just engage with us because we are bored. So that's it for this week. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and write a review, because it really helps us get seen in this vast, endless hell of horror movie podcasts. See ya.